484,000 people just landed inside a 2% tornado risk zone today. A single heat advisory is stretched across 8 states and the nation's capital right now. Storm fuel topping 3,000 joules per kilogram is stacking up over the northern plains. Today's Storm Prediction Center outlook has 2 separate slight risk zones, so watch both today. One sits across the eastern Dakotas and western Minnesota, the other over central Virginia. A surface low is spinning over far southwest Manitoba, so a cold front trails behind it. That front stretches southwest into Montana, and it is dragging a sharp shortwave trough with it. The shortwave is currently pushing through southern Saskatchewan and will keep sliding east today. Ahead of that front, a warm and very moist air mass is setting the stage. Afternoon highs will climb into the upper 80s and low 90s, so eastern South Dakota heats up fast. Farther south and west, some spots could reach the upper 90s and even the low hundreds. Dew points sitting in the mid to upper 60s will keep the atmosphere plenty unstable today. By mid-afternoon, over 2,000 joules of usable storm energy will be sitting across the region. Southeastern South Dakota could see a pocket of energy pushing all the way to 3,000. Earl out on his ranch in western South Dakota knows exactly what that number means for tonight. That kind of fuel, so combined with a sharp front, is exactly what fires up big storms. Storms should fire first across western North Dakota, so northwestern Minnesota gets hit soon after. The front colliding with all that buoyant air, so that is what kicks off the first cells. Enhanced flow wrapping around the shortwave will add extra spin to those early storms. That combination of buoyancy and shear, so it is a textbook setup for a few supercells. So the primary hazard early in this cycle is going to be large, damaging hail. Some of these storms could produce hail growing past 2 full inches in diameter. That size hail can total a car windshield. And Dale up in Toledo has seen that before. But this setup will not stay in supercell mode for long, so it shifts fast soon. Frontal forcing and close storm spacing usually force a quick shift into a more linear mode, which means once storms grow upscale, damaging straight-line wind becomes the dominant threat instead. That transition tends to happen fast, so cold pools reinforce each other along the line. South of that zone, from central South Dakota into northern Nebraska, coverage will be lower. Weaker shear down there limits organized storm modes, so isolated hail and gusts are still possible. Now here is a number that actually matters most for anyone near Fargo tonight. This entire corridor carries a 2% risk of an isolated tornado touching down. That risk zone covers about 24,804 square miles across the eastern Dakotas and western Minnesota. Inside that zone alone, 484,399 people are sitting under tonight's storm threat. Fargo, Grand Forks, Moorhead, West Fargo, and Wahpeton all fall directly inside this corridor. If you live in any of those 5 towns, tonight is genuinely a night to stay weather aware. Have a way to get warnings after dark, the kind Margaret always keeps ready in Lake Charles. Now let's swing all the way over to the second slight risk zone today, a hot, very moist boundary layer. So it is building up near a lee side pressure trough. MLCAPE values there are running from 1,500 up to 2,500 joules per kilogram. Forcing for storms to actually fire is weak, so convergence along that trough matters most. Vertical shear is also weak, so no 2 ways about it. Tornadoes are not the concern here. Instead, expect scattered clusters of storms, so they grow outward from their own cold outflow. Sandra, down in Alexandria, Virginia, is sitting right on the northern edge of this zone. High storm bases and steep lapse rates, so strong downdrafts are likely with any cell that fires. So the primary hazard across this corridor is going to be damaging straight-line wind gust. Highest coverage should run from central Virginia into far north-central North Carolina, so stay alert there. Richmond, Danville, and communities right along that Virginia-Carolina line should stay alert this evening. Meanwhile, out in the northern Great Basin, A completely separate shortwave is on the move. It is currently pushing into southwestern Idaho and will track northeast through the day. That wave carries moderate mid-level flow, somewhere around 35 to 40 knots up top. That is more than enough shear. So it supports a few supercells and bowing storm segments. Southern Montana and northern Wyoming could both see damaging wind and isolated hail today. Frank out in Springfield, Illinois, is watching this same pattern crawl east over the next few days. None of this system directly threatens Illinois today, so it is still worth tracking regardless. Down in the lower Mississippi Valley, a notable spin of energy is drifting south right now. It is moving from southwest Missouri into northwest Arkansas through the rest of today. Plenty of low-level moisture there will support MLKP values between 2,000 and 3,000 joules. Shear stays weak, so organization will be limited. But a few strong downdrafts are still possible. Margaret down in Lake Charles is not in today's storm zone, but she watches the bigger picture. So which means that bigger picture today is honestly less about storms and more about heat. A massive heat advisory has quietly become the biggest weather story, so it deserves real attention. This single advisory now stretches unbroken from Ohio all the way to Massachusetts and beyond. 8 separate states, plus the nation's capital, are all sitting under this same heat alert. That is one continuous advisory, so it covers some of the most densely populated ground in America. Cleveland and Toledo both sit right on the western edge of this expanding heat zone. Dale over in Toledo has felt this kind of heat build in before, and it never gets easier. Moving east, Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, and Scranton all sit fully inside today's advisory as well. Kingston, New York, and communities up through the Hudson Valley are included in this same alert. New York City itself sits directly under this advisory, along with Long Island and northern New Jersey. Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston, Massachusetts round out the northern edge of this heat zone. Washington, D.C. and Alexandria, Virginia both sit deep inside this same stretch of heat. So this advisory is not some small pocket. Honestly, it covers an enormous stretch of coastline. Smaller, separate pockets are also active today across parts of Michigan and central Illinois. Frank should keep an eye on that Illinois pocket, even outside today's main severe weather zone. A fourth pocket sits along the Kentucky and Tennessee border, plus one more around Raleigh, North Carolina. So no two ways about it. This heat problem is genuinely coast to coast in its footprint. Humidity riding along with this heat, so it feels several degrees hotter than the thermometer shows. That combination of heat and humidity. So that is why these advisories get issued in the first place. Heat advisories like this one exist because heat quietly kills more Americans most years than any storm. So folks, if you are anywhere inside that advisory zone, treat today with real respect. Limit time outdoors during peak afternoon hours. So check on elderly neighbors if you are able to. Pets and outdoor workers face real risk too, so plan extra water breaks into today's schedule. Dale says the trick in Toledo. So front-loading outdoor chores early beats the heat later. Sandra in Alexandria plans her afternoons entirely around staying inside once the advisory kicks in. This heat pattern is expected to hold steady, so plan for at least another day or two. So mark my words, this is not a one afternoon spike. It is a genuine multi-day event. Meanwhile, back across the Great Plains, tonight's severe storms will also help drive temperatures down fast, which means, ironically, the same storms bringing hail tonight will cool places off by tomorrow morning. That is the trade-off here. So cooler air comes at the cost of a rough evening. For the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, though, no such relief is currently built into the forecast. Switching gears completely, there is also a fresh fog advisory out early this morning in Kentucky. A dense fog advisory covered 13 counties across the western part of the state at sunrise. Fulton, Hickman, Carlisle, Graves, Marshall, Callaway, and Lyon counties were all included in that advisory. Trigg, Caldwell, Hopkins, Christian, Muhlenberg, and Todd counties rounded out that same fog advisory zone. Visibility dropped to around half a mile in spots, so travel got tricky during that morning window. So that advisory has already expired, and steady improvement is expected through the rest of the day. It is a small story compared to the heat and storms, but it is worth a quick mention. Fog like that is common on humid summer mornings, so a hot, sticky afternoon usually follows. Back to tonight's severe threat. Timing matters just as much as location for these Dakota storms. Storms should begin firing across western North Dakota during the mid to late afternoon hours. By early evening, that activity should push into the Fargo corridor, so stay alert after dark. Earl says storms like this in western South Dakota usually arrive right around supper time. The window for the strongest storms and any isolated tornado risk runs through the evening hours. By overnight, that activity should begin weakening as it pushes into Minnesota and Wisconsin. Down in the mid-Atlantic, storms should develop during the heat of the afternoon around Virginia. Those storms should track northeast into North Carolina and fade out by around sunset. In the lower Mississippi Valley, scattered storms will likely persist into the evening hours as well. None of today's individual storm modes look historically extreme, so no two ways about it. Stay grounded. But 4 separate risk areas active at once is, plain and simple, a busy day for July. Dale mentioned Toledo hasn't seen a heat and storm combination line up quite like this in a while. So which means today is really a 2-story day. Severe weather up north and heat everywhere else. Frank is watching to see if that western shortwave eventually slides close enough to reach Illinois. Sandra expects the heat to hold through Wednesday before any real relief works into Virginia. Margaret says the Gulf Coast is quiet today, but she always keeps one eye on the tropics. So that is the full picture for today. Storms up north, heat everywhere else, fog already fading. Looking ahead, tomorrow brings another round of severe weather. So this pattern is not finished yet. The heat across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic should hold firm for at least one more full day. That means today's pattern is not a one-day event, so it is settling in for a stretch. So which means anyone in that advisory zone should plan the next 48 hours around the heat. The Northern Plains severe threat should also continue in a similar form tomorrow afternoon and evening. For folks wondering how hot is too hot, heat index readings matter more than raw temperature. A heat index in the upper 90s to around 100 is enough to strain most healthy adults. Dale over in Toledo is already telling neighbors to check on older relatives without air conditioning. So folks, if you know somebody elderly or medically vulnerable, a quick check-in call goes a long way. Dale also reminds everyone that cars heat up dangerously fast, so never leave kids or pets inside. Meanwhile, in Alexandria, Sandra's biggest concern today is the metro platforms with no real shade. Commuters across Washington and Northern Virginia should expect a truly brutal wait for any train today. Cooling centers are opening in several cities, so anyone without air conditioning has somewhere to go. So no two ways about it. This is the kind of heat event that actually costs lives. Meanwhile, back up in the Dakotas, Earl is already watching the sky for that first afternoon buildup. Storm chasers and weather watchers across that corridor. So expect a long, active evening ahead. So which means both halves of the country are dealing with, honestly, serious weather today. One half is bracing for hail and wind, so the other braces for dangerous, prolonged heat. That is a lot of ground covered by just 2 separate weather stories happening at once. Let's zoom back out one more time and look at the bigger national picture together. Out west, monsoon moisture is starting to fire up storms, so Arizona and New Mexico get active. That activity could bring some relief to areas dealing with wildfire smoke over the past few weeks. Sandra says even Alexandria has felt smoky skies drift in from western fires earlier this summer. Nevada and much of the interior west should also see scattered thunderstorm chances through the week. None of that western activity is expected to turn severe, so it is mostly good news. So here's a question for everyone watching. Which part of the country do you want covered next? Maybe it is the Gulf Coast, the Rockies, or your own backyard. We really want to know. Drop a comment with the region you are curious about so we can dig into that data. We read every single comment. And honestly, your requests shape exactly what we cover going forward. And while you are down there, type your city into the comments below right now. We want to see exactly how many of you are sitting inside today's heat or storm zones. Comment your city, tag a neighbor who needs to see this, and let's map it out together. Earl says out on the ranch, you learn to respect both the hail and the heat equally. Frank in Springfield is just glad today's active pattern is staying north and east of Illinois. This has been a truly busy day for weather watchers from the Dakotas down to the Gulf. 2 slight risk zones, a broad heat advisory, and an early morning fog advisory, all in one day. That kind of spread across the map does not happen on every single Monday in July. So which means today's forecast really does deserve the extra attention we have given it. By tomorrow, expect another update as the Northern Plains threat rolls forward into a new day. The heat advisory should also get updated as forecasters watch just how long this stretch holds on. Margaret always says the tropics are quiet right up until the moment they are not. So even on a calm Gulf day, she keeps that radar pulled up out of habit. Frank's advice for Illinois today is simple. Enjoy the calm while this pattern stays to your north. Storm season in the plains rarely stays polite for long, so quiet spots should stay alert anyway. For everyone from Fargo to Alexandria to Toledo, today asks for a little extra weather awareness. None of these individual threats are record-breaking on their own, and that is honestly the point. It is the sheer number of overlapping hazards today. So that is what makes this forecast worth attention. So plain and simple, check your local alerts before you head out the door today. A 5-minute check now could honestly save you a rough evening later tonight. Sandra in Alexandria already has her phone alerts turned on for both heat and storms today. Dale in Toledo does the exact same thing, because this kind of overlap does not happen often. Earl checks radar out on the ranch the same way most people check the time. Margaret's rule down in Lake Charles is simple. Stay curious about weather, even on a quiet day. That habit is exactly why all 5 of them never get caught off guard by a pattern shift. So take a page from their book and build that same habit into your own routine. Stay weather aware, stay hydrated, and stay off the road if storms roll through your area tonight. Remember those 484,399 people sitting in tonight's 2% tornado zone? That number has not changed. Remember that heat advisory stretched across 8 states and the nation's capital. That is still active. And remember that pocket of energy pushing toward 3,000 joules over South Dakota. That fuel is still loading. Storms are loading in the north, heat is holding in the east, and the map keeps moving.